Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the intricacies of history's most pivotal conflicts. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore one of the most crucial battles of the American Revolutionary War, the Battle of Long Island, fought on August 27, 1776. This battle marked a turning point in the war as British forces sought to capture New York City and gain control of the strategically vital Hudson River. The city's harbor and surrounding waters were bustling with activity as American troops scrambled to prepare defenses against the mighty British Navy. Meanwhile, across the East River, on the rolling hills and wooded terrain of Long Island, a different story was unfolding. In July 1776, British General William Howe and his brother Admiral Richard Howe arrived off the coast of New York with a massive fleet, carrying over 20,000 troops. The brothers Howe were determined to crush the rebellion and restore British rule in the colonies. As they began to disembark their forces on Staten Island, Washington knew that he had to act quickly to defend Long Island, which lay just across the Narrows, a narrow strait separating the island from Brooklyn. The British plan was to outflank the American defenses by landing troops on the western edge of Long Island, near the town of Gravesend. This would give them a commanding view of New York City and allow them to bombard American positions at will. To understand the significance of this battle, it's essential to consider the events leading up to the British invasion. In June 1776, the Continental Congress had drafted the Declaration of Independence, formally declaring the 13 colonies' independence from Great Britain. This bold move was met with a swift response from the British government, which saw the rebellion as a threat to its authority. In response, the British assembled a massive army and naval force, with General William Howe and his brother Admiral Richard Howe at its helm. The brothers were seasoned military leaders with extensive experience in combat. General Howe had fought in the French and Indian War, while Admiral Howe had commanded the British fleet during the siege of Louisburg. As the British forces prepared to invade Long Island, Washington's Continental Army was busy fortifying its defenses. The Americans had built a series of earthen redoubts and trenches across the island, stretching from Brooklyn Heights to the Jamaica Pass. However, these defenses were still incomplete, and the American troops were outnumbered and outgunned. In the days leading up to the battle, Washington's forces conducted a series of skirmishes with British patrols, trying to gauge the enemy's strength and intentions. On August 22, 1776, a group of American militiamen clashed with a British patrol near the town of Flatbush, resulting in several casualties on both sides. As tensions escalated, Washington's army prepared for the impending battle. The Americans were determined to defend their ground despite being outnumbered and outgunned. In this earliest phase of the battle, we see the seeds of a larger conflict being sown. The British were testing American resolve, while Washington's troops were learning to adapt to the challenges of modern warfare. The battle-scarred landscape of Long Island was about to become a crucible, forging the very fate of a nation. The island's landscape is characterized by rolling hills, wooded areas, and vast plains, providing ample opportunities for both defensive and offensive maneuvers. The British plan was to utilize this terrain to their advantage, aiming to outflank the American defenses by landing troops on the western edge of Long Island, near the town of Gravesend, and then marching eastward towards Brooklyn Heights. The British forces, comprising over 20,000 well-trained and equipped soldiers, were a formidable opponent for the Continental Army. The Americans, numbering around 10,000 troops, were largely made up of militia forces who, although determined, lacked the experience and training of their British counterparts. Despite these odds, Washington's army was resolute in its defense of Long Island and New York City. On August 27, 1776, the day of the battle, the British launched a diversionary attack against the American lines at Brooklyn Heights, while simultaneously executing their flanking maneuver through the Jamaica Pass. This pass, situated to the east of the main American defenses, was lightly guarded due to its perceived natural defenses and the difficulty of traversing it with large numbers of troops. However, General Howe correctly identified it as a vulnerable point in the American lines. The British forces, under the command of General Charles Cornwallis, successfully navigated the Jamaica Pass, catching the American troops off guard and outflanking them. This maneuver exposed the rear of the American positions at Brooklyn Heights, placing Washington's army in a precarious situation. The Americans, realizing their vulnerability, attempted to regroup and form new defensive lines but were ultimately forced to retreat. The Battle of Long Island was one of the largest battles of the American Revolution, with both sides suffering significant casualties. Although the exact numbers are disputed among historians, it is estimated that the British suffered around 400 casualties, while the Americans lost over 2,000 men, including those killed, wounded, and captured. The defeat at Long Island marked a turning point in the war for Washington's army, as they were forced to withdraw from Brooklyn Heights and eventually evacuate New York City. The aftermath of the Battle of Long Island saw General Washington making strategic decisions to preserve his army and continue the fight against British rule. Recognizing the importance of maintaining an army capable of challenging British authority, he ordered a retreat from New York City to Manhattan and eventually to White Plains, where they could regroup and reassess their strategy. The bravery and determination displayed by soldiers on both sides underscore the complexity and depth of the conflict. For the Americans, despite their defeat, the battle marked an important learning experience, highlighting the need for better training, tactics, and strategic planning if they were to succeed in their fight for independence. The courage shown by soldiers like Colonel William Alexander, also known as Lord Stirling, who led a daring defense against overwhelming British forces, and the resilience of General Washington, who despite setbacks remained committed to the cause of liberty, are testaments to the enduring spirit of the American Revolution. The battle's impact on morale, both among the Continental Army and the civilian population, will also be explored, providing a deeper understanding of how this pivotal event shaped the course of American history. As we move forward in time, it's essential to examine how the Battle of Long Island influenced subsequent military campaigns and strategic decisions during the American Revolution. The defeat at Long Island marked a turning point in the war for Washington's army as they were forced to withdraw from Brooklyn Heights and eventually evacuate New York City. This retreat allowed the British to consolidate their control over the city, which would remain a crucial British stronghold for the remainder of the war. The aftermath of the Battle of Long Island saw General Washington making strategic decisions to preserve his army and continue the fight against British rule. Recognizing the importance of maintaining an army capable of challenging British authority, he ordered a retreat from New York City to Manhattan and eventually to White Plains, where they could regroup and reassess their strategy. This decision would prove crucial in the long run, as it allowed the Continental Army to survive and eventually launch counterattacks against the British. One notable example of the impact of the Battle of Long Island on subsequent military campaigns is the Battle of Trenton, fought on December 26, 1776. Following their defeat at Long Island, Washington's army had retreated to Pennsylvania, where they were able to regroup and plan a daring counterattack against the Hessian forces stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. The successful attack on Trenton, which caught the Hessians off guard and resulted in the capture of over 900 enemy soldiers, was a significant morale boost for the Continental Army and demonstrated that Washington's army was still a force to be reckoned with. The Battle of Long Island also had a profound impact on the morale of both the Continental Army and the civilian population. The defeat at Long Island was a significant blow to American morale, as it marked the first major defeat of the war and raised questions about the ability of the Continental Army to challenge British authority. However, Washington's leadership and strategic decisions in the aftermath of the battle helped to maintain morale and prevent widespread desertion. Additionally, the bravery and determination displayed by soldiers during the battle, such as Colonel William Alexander, also known as Lord Stirling, who led a daring defense against overwhelming British forces, served as an inspiration to others and helped to sustain morale. In the months following the Battle of Long Island, Washington's army underwent significant changes as the general worked to improve training, tactics, and strategic planning. The Continental Army began to adopt more flexible and adaptable tactics, which would serve them well in future battles. Additionally, Washington's leadership and commitment to the cause of liberty helped to maintain unity and cohesion within the army, despite the challenges and setbacks they faced. The battle marked a turning point in the war, as Washington's army was forced to retreat from New York City and regroup in preparation for future battles. However, despite this defeat, the Continental Army was able to survive and eventually launched successful counterattacks against the British, ultimately paving the way for American independence. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.